computer.
Rattle, rattle, rattle.
Welcome to episode 34 of the Civil War Breakfast Club. I am your co-host, Mary, and joining me tonight with new and improved sound is my awesome co-host, Darren.
Hold on to your butts.
I was actually going to say something like, hold on to your butts, and we're talking part 2 of Shiloh.
Hey ho, we're talking to Shiloh.
For anybody that was at our Facebook Live on Saturday, you will know that we had a little bit of a digression comparing Shiloh to Jurassic Park and which characters would be who. And we concluded that Beauregard would definitely be Samuel L. Jackson's character. About
This one's starting strong. So, how are you? How's everything going?
I'm going to redo that introduction.
It's great.
I'm going to redo.
Oh, fuck, okay, fine.
It was bad.
That's a first.
It was bad. Okay. Welcome to episode 34 of the Civil War Breakfast Club. I am your co-host, Mary, and I am joined by my awesome co-host, Darren Weeks, who has a new and improved sound system.
I've got a mic. The hell? So how are you? What's going on?
I'm good. How are you?
This intro's so much better than the other one we just did.
Oh my God.
Anyway, so
Jeez.
yeah, we've had some.
I just
are we
stopped.
doing another one?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Let's just. Tell me
I know, because I like the hold on to your butts thing that you did, and then I just I felt like I wasn't doing very good. So.
Oh, let's just do it natural. I'm just gonna tease you.
I know. I want you to. Yeah, I should have just kept it going the first time because it was good.
Right.
But I do like the hold on to your butts thing. That was really good.
Ooh.
Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Welcome to episode 34 of the Civil War Breakfast Club. I am your co-host, Mary, and joining me tonight with an awesome new sound microphone thingy is my co-host, Darren.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. No more rattling for me. Sorry, everybody. But anyway, we had some issues in the last one that I didn't know about until afterwards. But anyway, yeah, it's pretty good. And this is a new ground for us here at the Old Breakfast Club, man. This took many takes for this intro. Yep. It was about 1 million, actually. And so here we go with that. So how's everything going? How's your week?
It was good. How about you?
Oh, it's been absolutely soft serving sunshine here in Cape Cod, as always, Mary. Nothing but happiness in the old neighborhood. So I thought we had a really good podcast, and we had a really good live. We had a really good live, I thought, for the most part.
We did. We had the reason for the if anybody's noticed our tweets about this episode so far, there's some Jurassic Park references because we actually had a discussion about Jurassic Park. And we came away with Beauregard being Samuel L. Jackson's character.
Because he woke up that day on April 7th. We're going to talk about, and the world was different. He thought things were going really, really well. And it turns out that he had a hold on to your butts moment as he realized that Don Buell and Lou Wallace had showed up. And we're going to talk about that in detail today. We're going to talk about the 7th as we sit here. It is April 6th, I think, and it is the first day of the actual Battle of Shiloh from 1862. And we're going to talk about the second half of it, which is April 7th, and it's going to spill a little bit into April 8th. Not everybody knows there was an April 8th at Shiloh, Mary. A lot of people think it's just 2 days.
No, and I often think of it as being just 2 days, but then when you read about fallen timbers, that is really the end of the Battle of Shiloh. At least, just in my opinion, it is. But hold on to your butts.
Hold on to your butts.
Before we get into the episode, what are we drinking tonight?
Oh, that's right. So since we're doing Shiloh, I'm drinking Northern Lights by 10 Bents Beer because it has a little angel glow can. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. I'm drinking it again out of my unconditional surrender U.S. Grant mug because he is in this episode very much so. And what about yourself?
Well, I managed to find I stopped at the Lickbow on my way home today. Shocking.
Mhm.
And Jurassic IPA. And I saw that
Jurassic
and I'm like, that's
IPA.
perfect. And then I am drinking it out of my James A. Garfield mug,
Mhm. I've heard of
which I
him. He was here. He was at the
he was at
battle.
this
Yeah,
battle.
he was.
A lot of people associate him with the Battle of Chickamauga, but he's at this battle as well.
Absolutely was. He absolutely was. So we're going to talk about this. Have some fun with this one. So before we get going with day two, I guess we got to go back into the Wayback Machine from last week
Mm-hmm.
and talk about the original part of the battles. We'll start off right at the end. But in a nutshell, basically, you have U.S. Grant, who's going to be moving south down the Tennessee River, and he's going to be having to run into a force led by Beauregard, PGT Beauregard. We call Beauregard here at the Old
Yep.
Breakfast Club for obvious reasons. They're going to meet in Corinth. They're going to bring the armies together. They're going to bring in 4 corps. Actually, I'm going to take that back. 3 corps. Was that 4 corps 7 years ago, Mary? But you had 3 corps led
About
by
a million.
about a million. Leonidas Pike, Braxton Bragg, and William Hardee. Actually, there were 4 corps. You got to pick up the Breckinridge in there too. So
Yeah,
he was a
remember
reserve.
3
So
in the front, 1 in the rear.
1 on the back. We got a little dusty here.
Ooh.
But the Confederates are bringing this Southern Army together because the things are going really, really bad in the West. So they need to stem this tide after losing Fort Henry, Fort Donelson, Mill Springs, Pea Ridge. There's so much crap going on in the West. So what Jeff Davis wants to do is he wants to bring in Albert Sidney Johnson, consolidate the army under the Army of the Mississippi, with about 40,000 guys, and they're going to try to slow down this freight train that is the Army of the Tennessee with U.S. Grant. And so they're going to meet at Corinth, and they're going to do their best, and they're going to get the best of Grant in the Army in that first day. We talked a lot about the episode. If you can make it through the rattling, you'll be able to hear about what happened. But the way it's going to work is there's going to be an attack that's going to ultimately screw up in a lot of ways for the South. Again, there's so much communication issues with that battle. Beauregard's plan was to attack the Union left, which really doesn't happen because he spends most of his time on the Union right in a place called the Hornet's Nest. And by the time they are able to go around that Union left, things just fall apart. Rebs run out of gas, but they do push them back. They spend a good couple hours in that Hornet's Nest through artillery by Daniel Ruggles. They push Grant and Sherman and all those guys back. And as the night falls on April 6th, the Rebs are feeling pretty good about themselves. So Grant's been pushed back to Pittsburgh Landing. There's all kinds of rain. And we talk about this all the time with the rain, right? But rain is falling on the battlefield. These lightning strikes, and it's lighting up the battlefield, and it's illuminating the dead and the injured.
Yep.
This talks of the soldiers and their moans. It's just a real shitty situation. But this is the first time a lot of these guys have seen this. A lot of these soldiers are green, but they've never seen a battle like this.
No, it's the first time I think, well, this is the bloodiest day, and these are the bloodiest 2 days in American history to this point when it's all said and done. And a lot of them are, it's the first time, as you said, that they've ever seen anything this horrific. And it's what, Grant at the end of the battle, he's like, oh shit, this is not going to be like a short-term thing. Like, we're not going to have this wrapped up at the end of the year at all. This is going to drag out if this is how these guys are going to be fighting with us. Right. Like,
well, there was a Union soldier who had a quote. He said, "The ground had opened up and spit up hell," which sounds a lot like my workday today. But that's exactly what the soldier said. They'd seen a lot of stuff go on that they hadn't seen before.
That also sounds like a Tuesday night with me.
Oh, any day that ends with a Y. But during the night of April 6th, said okay. During the night of April 6th, the Union is going to bombard the rebel positions with artillery from the boats, from U.S. Lexington and the Tyler. It's more of a psychological thing than anything. There's not really much damage being done, but it's keeping them up. It's just hearing them, just this artillery coming in. But the biggest issue the Rebs have, and this is one of those whistling by the graveyard things they pretend they don't. Nathan Bedford Forrest, always a fun lover, Mary. He's going to take a ride up the Tennessee River, and he's going to see a bunch of boats coming in. And on these boats is going to be the late arriving Don Carlos Buell and his Army of the Ohio. They're going to start driving Pittsburgh Landing with about 20,000 guys. And also, Lew Wallace is going to be showing up as well. Lew Wallace, the 3rd Division. He's going to have 3 brigades, Morgan, Smith, John Thayer, and Charles Whitesley. But it's going to add about 24,000 guys, and more importantly, fresh guys into this battlefield. And the Rebs are feeling pretty good. Beauregard writes that letter back to Jefferson Davis saying that they won the day. But again, I think realistically speaking, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, a lot of the soldiers are starting to hear rumors of these reinforcements coming.
Yeah.
And they know they're in for it the next day.
Yeah, well, Forrest, like he sees them and he tries to go find where Beauregard is, and he stops at where Patrick Claiborne is camped, where Sherman had actually been the day before, and he's looking for him, and then they got talking, and Forrest basically tells Claiborne, "We're fucked." We're fucked because
there's so many words.
There's reinforcements arriving, and the thing with these reinforcements that are arriving, it's kind of in a way it's comical because they're arriving at night and they can't see anything. So Buell's men they're arriving and they're actually starting to walk over these men that are sleeping. So it's kind of like me stumbling around on a Saturday night, I guess.
Yeah, but we probably don't. I'm sure he told somebody he was where he was, but that's another story.
So they're stumbling around, and one soldier said that there was a horse loose in camp. He just passed right over us, and believe he broke some of my ribs. And Buell's men also run into trees in the darkness, so it's just a real shit show to get them there. But they all arrive at the battlefield by about 4 a.m. and they start getting positioned into their lines to renew the battle in the morning. Lew Wallace has arrived a little bit earlier at about 6 o'clock, and he's going to be on the extreme right with Grant occupying the right as well, and then Buell will be the center and the left.
He rolls in fashionably late, probably on his chariot, probably broke a wheel, probably, but it's good 7 hours late. But I mean, the biggest thing the Rebs are kind of ignoring, the elephant in the room, I don't mean Sedgwick, okay, is the death of Albert Sidney Johnston the day before, which arguably is the greatest death of the highest ranking general in the Civil War. We talked about that in the live, speaking of Sedgwick. Albert Sidney Johnston's he's gonna be in that duel. He's gonna get shot earlier. He's gonna numb his leg, so he's gonna take a ball behind his right knee, and he's gonna bleed to death. An interesting guy, he ultimately dies, and he's gonna be buried in Metairie Cemetery in New Orleans, and Sherman later is gonna tell him he can't have military honors for his funeral. He can't because he's a friggin' traitor. So he gets buried like a regular guy. Beast Butler, okay, Benjamin Butler digs him up. Do you know the story?
No.
They dig his body up because he hears a rumor he's buried with treasure, which it wasn't. So
God.
So they dig up Johnston. He finally eventually gets buried. I mean, he gets buried where he is. But his pallbearers include, James Longstreet, Richard Taylor, John Bill Hood, Braxton Bragg, Beauregard, Simon Bolivar Buckner. And so it ends up being a big fiasco. But his post-death, kind of like Lincoln, his body kind of is up and down over and over again.
Oh my God.
So he finally gets buried. I think he gets buried in Texas, I think ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's where he's buried.
And there was concerns about that because during the funeral, Texas was the one state that the Union never really won a big battle in. And they weren't sure, like they thought the war was going to be over. And it was a big fiasco when he finally got buried like in 1867. So, but that's a big loss for them. I mean, that we talked before about the impact of his death, about how it took away something from the future with the West. You mentioned Don Carlos Buell. So he's going to show up and he's fashionably friggin' late. He takes the overland route down through Savannah. Doesn't take the boat. Takes him 22 days instead of friggin' 9. Interesting dude, Ohio guy, naturally, like half of these guys are. West
Your
Point
favorite
class
state, right?
Oh, absolutely. West Point class of 1841 finished 32nd of 52. Noted significantly for his high demerits and discipline problems. So it sounded like a certain kid from Waltham High back in the day, remained nameless. He fought in Mexico under Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott. He was a close friend of George McClellan, Mary, and he was. And when he was in Washington, he basically ended up going into Kentucky. He got sent to Kentucky by McClellan. He replaced Sherman in command of the Army of the Ohio. It was funny because we joke about the whole tardy thing, right? He was criticized for being slow, even back then, by McClellan. which has got irony written all over it. But
Well, when
leave
you
that
take
alone.
22 days to get somewhere, like that's like waiting for a certain individual that says 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Gee, whoa, damn, horse you rode in on. But so going back to this, so going back to the early of April 7th, Grant's going to counterattack early the next morning. He decides, he's got his guys. There's that famous story where it's Sherman comes up to him and says, "We've had the devil's own day," and Sherman comes back. Grant comes back and says, "Well, lick him tomorrow, though." Beauregard's doing, like we said, he does that victory lap, which is going to, and I think this is important as we talk about this day, about how he reacts during this day. He writes a letter to Jefferson Davis. "We this morning attacked the enemy in strong position, and after a severe battle of 10 hours, gained a complete victory, driving the enemy from every position." Okay, so you send that letter off. So now they're getting this. Everyone in Richmond's all excited. But Forrest has that, Nathan Bedford Forrest has that recon. He goes to the Tennessee River, sees those troops, and he knows they're probably going to be in for it. Grant and Buell, they're going to attack at dawn. They have this battle plan. So like Lionel Richie, they were up all night long, Mary, planning this thing. And so they're going to place these troops in a way that's going to ultimately put the fresh troops in front. Now, this was the mistake that Grant made the day before, right? He put his weakest troops in the front, and he put his strongest troops in the back.
Yeah, and Claiborne awakens that morning to the realization that, yes, indeed, Forrest was right, and the reinforcements have arrived. And Hardy's going to order him to advance along the Bank Road. And his brigade had been really reduced the day before. So he had started April the 6th with 2,700 guys. On dawn of the 7th, when he wakes up, he's down to just 800. And he said, "My brigade was sadly reduced. Hundreds of my best men were dead or in hospitals." So keep in mind, like unlike the Union, the Confederates have not had reinforcements. Van Dorn is miles away at this point, and Beauregard is holding out hope that he's going to arrive. But I think he stopped at the Bang Barn.
Oh, well, I guess he probably did. Maybe we'll see. Who knows? But so Grant, you decide he's going. You referenced earlier, he's going to put Lew Wallace's arriving 3rd Division on the Union far right. So that's where they're going to be, because that's pretty much where they're going to arrive from, over that Snake Creek, right?
Yeah.
So he's going to start with an artillery attack on a guy named Captain Ketchum's battery from Ruggles Division, who's camped in McClernand's old camp from that previous morning. Sherman's 5th Division is going to be put on Wallace's left, followed by McClernand's 1st on the right, with the rest of William W. Wallace's 2nd Division, who's under control now of James Tuttle, because Wallace went up the spout the day before, as they say. Yeah, he didn't make it.
Well, he's not quite dead yet.
They think he's dead. He's pretty much going now. But then they're going to put Hurlburt's 4th Division east, and they're going to extend to that river. Sherman's 5th Division is going to be along that Harrisburg-Savannah road. But they're going to be the second line. They're going to be like the one that's going to be coming in second, right? Because Buell's Fresh Army of the Ohio is going to be in front, right? They're going to have on their rights, on the Union left side, a guy named William Bull Nelson. We've talked about him a couple different podcasts off and on, from Kentucky. He was that dude who got killed by Jefferson C. Davis in the hotel in November of 60, later that year, for lying. He got shot in the hotel. But luckily for the Union, Jefferson C. Davis didn't get him yet, because he was instrumental in this battle. He's going to be placed on the Union left, and he's going to have Thomas Crittenden's 5th Division on his right, with Alexander McCook's 2nd Division kind of in the middle. He's going to be kind of there. But they got a strong line, so you've got really 2 strong lines that are going to extend. Nelson's going to move south. He's going to be the first one who's going to be going, and he's going to be along that river near that peach orchard, that Sarabelle peach orchard we talked about last week. And McCook and Crittenden are going to begin sort of moving inland along that Corinth road that kind of cuts along, right? Buell's going to have a mile-long line. His left is going to be anchored on that Tennessee River, and his right's going to be along the junction of that Corinth, Hamburg, and Savannah road. So he's in a really good position. Grant's going to have 45,000 guys pretty much ready to go. But most important, Mary, is almost a half of them are fresh. They haven't fought. And that's going to be huge for the Union going forward.
Yeah, because like we said, like the Confederates have no fresh troops. These are guys that had fought the day before and they only had a certain number of rations with them and they were running out. So some of them didn't eat that night, the night after or after the first day, they hadn't eaten at all. So they're not like this army's not in very good shape at all. And when sorry, I'm trying to find my spot here.
Well, I'll just sit here in the corner. Well, let me tell you real quick about the Confederates while you're doing that. While you're updating your status update, I'll tell you about the Confederates, okay? Confederate lines, I mean, you remember from the day before, they all got intermingled. And before Johnson got killed,
that's right.
He arranged them into those 4 grids, kind of like a zone defensive type thing. The next morning, they're still screwed up. And this is a mistake that Beauregard makes, is he doesn't reorganize that well. The next morning, they're still all intermingled. You've got brigades and different corps, and they're all over the place.
It's very similar to what happens at Chickamauga, actually. Like how like they got all how Bragg did the lines there. They get all like commingled and together. So they're just completely scattered and they basically slept where they had been fighting, like
that's not unusual, but it's Johnson's dead. The corps are all spread out. Leonidas Polk's first corps is completely missing. No one knows where the hell they are. Charles Clark and Benjamin Cheatham they can't find them. It takes an aide 2 hours to find that whole corps, and they're about 4 miles away from the river. They end up going way south. I don't know where the hell they were, where they were doing, but it took a while to find them. Beauregard's he's trying to do what he can to reorganize the lines because they're all mixed up. The only corps that has all of their brigades together is John Breckinridge, ironically, because he was the reserve guy.
Yeah.
He was the only one who had them. Hardee, Bragg, Polk, they're all commanding mixed up brigades along a 3-mile front, which is like herding frigging cats at this point.
Yeah, it is. Right? And so around 8:30 is when the attack happens, and the heaviest fighting's on the Union left where Nelson is engaged, who you mentioned a few minutes ago. And then around 9:30, there's fighting in the area of the Hornets' Nest again. And this is like the way Claiborne is positioned, he's going to have his left flank in the air. So this is like this is something that happens to O.O. Howard at Chancellorsville.
Oh.
Left hanging in there. There's our O.O. reference. Look at me.
Wow.
Getting in the O.O.
It's my O.O. surprise face.
So Claiborne, and this is an example of how mixed up they are. So Claiborne is actually, his commander is technically Hardee. He gets an order from Bragg that he, there basically is this artillery duel going on between the Union and the Confederates. And the orders that he gets are to move up. And Claiborne is not one to ever question orders at all. But in this case, he's having a kind of what the shit with this. Like,
I think he'd be fucking Jesus. I think that's exactly what he would have said, actually.
And he questions it because he's completely without support. And he's going to be outflanked on the left. And he's said, I would be destroyed if I advanced. So he has to halt what he's doing because of this federal artillery, because it's just becoming so insane. And some of his men end up getting killed by falling tree limbs, because keep in mind, like the terrain of Shiloh is one reason why it's not just how Johnson has moved the men the day before into these like 4 kind of like how he did it. It's also the terrain, because remember when Claiborne was advancing the day before, his brigade gets separated. So one goes off in one direction, one goes off in the other. So it's very, very chaotic. And it's the same way as the day before.
Well, it's all screwed up. I mean, Beauregard is going to do his best. He's going to range his line about a mile from the Tennessee River, northwest to southeast. Okay, but again, you have different guys. So you got about 30,000 guys, give or take, probably a little bit less at this point. Hardee, Polk, Breckinridge, Bragg, Polk, Breckinridge, and Hardee is the way it's going to go. And like you said, Breckinridge is going to be near that Hornet's Nest. But they're all going to be spread out. But the troops know something's up. They just do. There's a quote by a guy named A.H. Mecklin, okay? And he says, I began to have my doubts as to the outcome of this battle. I knew the enemy was reinforced and stoutly. So say what you mean about that, stoutly. That's been reenactor size pants, man. Who knows? But they knew that something was up. And when the Feds did attack, to your point, they're going to basically attack. You mentioned Nelson attacking, but you're going to have Wallace attacking too on that Union right. They're going to basically attacking the ends. and they attack quick. There was a Louisiana private who said they, they approached, they appeared to be like ants in the nest. The more we fired upon them, the more they swarmed. Lots of bugs in this one with hornets and ants and all kinds of stuff.
How are you
right?
not having a panic attack?
I'm not afraid of those. I'm a bees.
What about Bee Ridge?
I don't
remember
like
Bee
the
Ridge.
bees. Anyway, but this, as this goes on, you're going to have this wave of Yankees, right? Guy, there's a guy named Thomas Robinson. He's going to say, at daybreak, as the pickets came rushing in, a murderous fire, and the first thing we knew was we were surrounded by 6 or 7 regiments of Yankees. So they were facing Wallace's 3rd Division, these guys. This is the 4th Louisiana. These was Gibbon's guys. But they were all mixed up, too. So Nelson, he's going to lead his 4th Division on that Union left down that Hamburg-Savannah road. So they're going to get going a little bit early. They finally get going. It's you mentioned about 10 o'clock. It's arguable what time it was, but they are going to arrive at a place called the Widow Wicker's Field. And William Hayes' 19th Brigade is going to get there, and they're going to get hit pretty quickly by James Chalmers' troops under Bragg, who was with Hardy's troops, because that's how screwed up it was. Mm-hmm. But they're going to get hit. They're going to get hit pretty good. Because up to that point, there was 0 resistance. They were moving right along. Chalmers is going to block that first federal advance, and they basically, those guys had come up from where David Stewart's camp was from the previous day. They had advanced back, but that's where Chalmers and those guys were. But they're going to block them at that point. That's going to go on about an hour and a half or so. And both sides are trying to get reinforcements. This is on that Union left now, where that Peach Orchard is, right? Thomas Crittenden, Alexander McCook's divisions, they're going to be coming up behind Nelson on his right. And they're going to be advancing towards that hornet's nest, that thicket, and that's where they're going to kind of go. So by 10 o'clock in the morning, shit's on. I mean, they're totally engaged at that Peach Orchard. That's the area right where Johnston had gotten killed the day before.
Yeah.
But also, as this is going on, Lew Wallace is fighting Preston Pond's brigade, who's under Ruggles at Jones Field, and again, this is kind of going on at the same time. Pond is going to end up moving Pond's going to basically disappear. He's going to leave the dance floor, as you say. He's going to slide to the right, is what he's going to do, okay? Because he's going to end up to support Hardy, and on the other side, to fight Buell's guys, because he's got Nelson coming down. So Pond is going to basically go to the right to help support them. But what that's going to do, it's going to open an opportunity for Wallace to keep moving forward, right? Mm-hmm. So Wallace is going to move forward into that northern end of Jones Field. Randall Gibbon, he's going to be there, and who's going to be coming up to move up with Randall Gibbon to slow him down is the great Sterling A.M. Wood, who is going to be rising to the occasion, Mary. Okay? And so they're going to slow down that Wallace's advance into Jones Field. So this is kind of all going on. Wallace does get slowed. I mean, he does, because he's going to deal with these guys. He's going to wait for support that's coming up on the backside from our friend William T. Sherman and McClernand's divisions, who are going to be on his left. So you can see what's going on. This is already going to be kind of a mess. Wood and Gibbon are going to counterattack Wallace. Ruggles is going to push forward, but they're going to get pushed back pretty quick. I mean, the numbers tell the story with all these battles. Reb's going to get pushed back by John Thayer's. Oof. John Thayer's. Whoa, edit that one out. But John Thayer's Morgan Smith's brigades are going to be ultimately going to do that. So as this is going on, so you got 2 sides on the left and the right. You've got action that's going.
Yeah. And this is actually the part where, so getting later into the battle, closer to probably around 1 o'clock, Beauregard actually ends up getting involved in the battle.
He does. He's going to come later on left, but Buell at this time is he's still doing his thing. He's going to, before he gets it, he's going to advance on that Sarah Bell's Peach Orchard, like we said before. And he's going to hit Hardy's guys, right? And along that Hamburg-Purdy Road. The 22nd Brigade under Colonel Sanders Bruce, just like saying the name, Colonel Sanders. You wonder how long it took him to get across the road? Who knows? But Colonel Sanders Bruce is going to be there under Nelson. And he's going to attack across that Sarah Bell field. And they're going to get pushed back pretty quickly. You know who's going to push them back, Mary? on the Confederate side is that Washington, Louisiana artillery, who we
Hmm.
talked about from Gettysburg, right?
Yeah.
They were the ones who fired those first signals that they'd pick a charge. But they're in a place called Davis Wheatfield, so those guns are gonna basically push them back. Um, Hardy's gonna counterattack. This is where John Bowen gets involved under Breckinridge, and they're going to get pushed back quickly to Hamburg Purdy Road again. And this whole thing's a mess. There's so much moving parts with this, but Hayes's brigade is going to get pushed back. And then who's going to join the fray? It's kind of like this is your life. William Suey Smith's going to show up, Mary,
Oh
from the
God.
from the 14th Brigade under Crittenden. So he's going to help Hazen slow those advances. So he's going to ultimately be there as well. And they're going to rush into that Davis Wheatfield and overrun that Washington artillery. So good for Suey. So
Yeah.
Suey and Sherman back together again before the march
Before what happens at Meridian.
in Meridian. So Louisiana troops, the 19th Louisiana is going to basically move up and to help support those artilleries, the Washington artillery. They're going to retake those batteries. There's some hand-to-hand combat in that Davis Wheatfield, but there's a lot of ebb and flow to this. It's going back and forth and back and forth. Nelson's eventually going to fall back and he's going to regroup in that Widow Wickersfield. And after Breckinridge and Hardy end up on both sides of his flank, so he's going to find himself getting surrounded. So he's going to back off. And what they want to do is kind of reform. Breckinridge is going to be on Hardy's left. They're going to push Crittenden back into that Hornet's Nest thicket as well with Smith. But what they want to do is just heading on to that early afternoon, to your point, is the Union now is pushed forward. They got pushed back. They're going to push forward, but they realize there's something. They have an opportunity here, right? Just like Lee in the movie. We have an opportunity here. So, but they need to reform because what they don't want to do is end up like the Rebs did the day before and end up all over the place. So they said, we got them. We think we know what we're doing, but let's just catch our breath. Let's just touch base, make sure everything's good. So as we head into the afternoon, the Union knows where the Rebs are. They know where they're going to attack. But now they get a chance to catch their breath and reset, which is going to be huge going into the afternoon.
Exactly. And this is at the time that Beauregard finds out that Van Dorn ain't making it. He's not. He's still miles away and he's not going to make it. So he's not going to have those reinforcements. And he had planned, if Van Dorn was there, to do a flank attack, which, if you think about it, could have been like gave the Union a run for their money. Like they know they've got it with their numbers right now because Beauregard's only got 20,000 troops.
It's
And
a numbers game. 9 times out of 10.
He needs Van Dorn's men. But this is the thing that what if Van Dorn had actually not stopped at the Bang Barn or whatever the fuck he was up to, and
Well,
maybe
it's
get there
that
quickly,
what if Meade was at Gettysburg question? Same question we always have.
What?
See, paying attention. But a lot of the numbers usually do dictate the stories with these.
Mhm.
And we talked before at the beginning about the losses the Rebs had.
Yep.
Not having Van Dorn was a huge loss for that. But you know what though? They needed bodies. So like I said, you get an early afternoon. Crittenden's 5th Division is going to reform, and they're going to attack again. Breckinridge with McCook on his right side. They're going to move across that to a place called Duncan's Field, and they're going to break through Crittenden's line. There's going to be crazy casualties. There's going to be heavy casualties around this time. Many soldiers just leave the dance floor themselves. They say, "The hell with this. This is stupid," which is going to be a common theme as the afternoon goes on. But the Yankees are pushing south now. They're a steamroller. They're just going south. The Rebs are going to do their best. Nelson, who's reinforced and he's caught his breath and he's ready to go. Bull Nelson, bull of a man, Mary, bull. That's why they call him Bull. So he's a big guy. He's moving south again and he's going to attack into that Sarah Bell Field again. That intersection of the Savannah and Hamburg and Purdy Road. And as the early afternoon goes on, Hardy is going to be driven back by Nelson into Prentice's old campsite. So this is how far they're getting. Right, they're moving. They must be moving pretty quick. Well, he was a bull, so he's probably moving pretty fast, But the Rebs are falling back and they're retreating south towards Shiloh Church now. So they're moving back. The Rebs just can't do it anymore, and they're giving up. On the Union right, Bragg and Polk are trying to hold back Sherman, Hurlbut, and McClernand.
Yeah,
and they're eventually going to retreat from Jones Field because they just can't do it. And Beauregard's sitting at his headquarters at Shiloh Church. and he sees what's going on.
Yeah.
And to your point, he's like, well, and I think this is where it's important. He had sent that telegram the night before, so he couldn't lose. He couldn't.
Yeah, he's
He just
feeling the same pressure that Johnston was feeling the day before with, you think about it like the night before Shiloh, like Beauregard is saying to Johnson, we can't attack, like we've lost the element of surprise, and Johnson's like, nope, we have to. And it was kind of a do or die thing for Johnston. And I mean, yeah, Johnston ends up dying, but he had to, because keep in mind that the Confederates have lost, Henry and Donelson, they've lost Pea Ridge. They need a victory. And as you said, to your point, like Beauregard sent this telegram basically saying, we fucking got it. And now he's like seeing his troops getting pushed back, and he has this oh shit moment. And this is something, this is a part of the battle that I don't think gets talked a lot about. What Beauregard does here. I think there's this thought that he is back most of the time and not involved.
well,
He gets
right.
out and he nearly pulls an Albert Sidney Johnston.
Well, I think we'll talk about that, but I think that's what he wanted. To be totally honest, we again, this is the what if thing we do.
Yeah.
I think he thought in his mind, and this is just me spitballing here. I think he thought if he rode on front and got taken out, he'd look better in the end. Because if he survived and this battle fell in his face, I think he knew he was done.
Yeah.
So I think it was one of those, I have to go all out. If I don't make it, so be it. So he's sitting at Shiloh Church and he's on his phone. He's texting people because he needs people. So he's frantically trying to set up a defensive line in a place called Water Oaks Pond. Okay. And just west of the Shiloh Church. The Rebs basically are the lines are unraveling right in front of him at this point. So as the afternoon goes on, the fighting's heavy. Hardy on that rebel right, he's falling back. The strong point of the rebel line is still on the left side where Owl Creek is. There's a guy named Lovell Brousseau in the 4th Brigade. He's going to attack across a place called Wolf Field. But again, every one of these attacks is short term. You hit and then you fall back, and that's it. Sherman and Wallace are going to continue to press that rebel left flank as well. With the Federals are driving south, and I mean they're moving fast and fast. They're moving faster than you going to the liquor store on a Friday afternoon. That's how fast they're moving. So they're really chugging along.
Talking about I go in every day and then in a while.
I know. But Beauregard calls on Preston Pons. You've talked about him before. His brigade. He's got 2 regiments. And he says, come to Shiloh Church and, come to Shiloh Church. It'll be fun. Come on. It'll be a good time. Bring along.
There's candy.
Yeah, look, there's candy. We're going to attack. We're going to hit some guys. We're going to have some candy. So he wants to attack there. And then there's that story, that Robert Russell, he gets quoted a lot through a lot of these stories. But he says, General Beauregard, he bore the colors in front of the rebel line under fire of the enemy, right? So he's sitting there literally trying to rally the troops to your point. And I don't know if it was a death wish or if it was just I have to be seen today, type of thing.
My
but,
people need me.
No. But he was recklessly exposing himself.
He
was
again. Very much. He goes out there and he actually grabs a couple of the flags, and his one of his staff, Colonel Thompson, said he sees the banners of 2 different regiments and led them forward in the face of enemy fire. And Thompson at this point is, as you said, these troops are beginning to realize like we're fucked. Thompson said that I became convinced that our troops were too much exhausted to make a vigorous to make a vigorous resistance. So Thompson goes to plead with Beauregard, saying, "You should expose yourself no further, but to retire from Shiloh Church in good order." And you've got to wonder if that's like they're thinking, "Fuck, like we lost Albert Sidney Johnston. We don't need to lose this guy," because when I was doing the research for this, when you think about it, look back at Pea Ridge and what happened there and how the command structure fell because of the commanders getting taken out and then there being poor communication. Like there's a lot of Shiloh that is very similar to Pea Ridge, with these commanders recklessly exposing themselves, as you say. Like that's what happened to those 2 Confederate commanders at Pea Ridge. They get taken out, nobody knows, and everything just goes into chaos. And that's probably why one of the reasons they lost the battle. But Thompson's recognizing like, whatever the fuck Beauregard's doing. And who knows how adrenaline plays into this? Like he might just be thinking like, yeah, I can go out in front and they'll rally behind me, you know?
Well, he was in the Beauregard, to his defense, okay, he kept trying. So even he's trying to rally his troops. His troops look at him going, seriously, go screw. We're not doing this, right? But he's still trying. He tries one last counterattack.
Hmm.
He has a little bit of success in the feds. He pushes them back into that Water Oaks pond. He forces McCook back a little bit. And this is funny too, because you know who else is personally directing troops here too, Mary, is Grant,
Yeah.
right? He's going to direct a guy named James Veach from the 2nd Brigade to Hurlbut to help stabilize that falling Union line
Hmm.
on that as they're going to hit on their right flank. So it's kind of the dueling commanders here.
Yeah.
But the end of the Rebs are done here. They're done. They're completely shift,
Oh,
and so that Robert Roswell we talked before, Russell, he says human endurance can stand no longer against such odds, and our forces were compelled to fall back. So they knew they were done. And no matter who you are, you could be the greatest motivator in the world. When you're done and you see, because now this is when Beauregard says, you know something? Forrest was saying something about reinforcements, and I think he might have been right.
yeah.
Right? So he's realizing now that the reinforcements he heard rumors about, the soldiers were all talking about, yep, they were right. They got guys, they got Buell's guys now. And so he decides, you know what? Fuck the hell out of this.
Yeah, and one of the
You
things that
know,
makes him decide it is another member of his staff, Colonel Jordan, comes up to him and says, like, are we not like a lump of sugar, thoroughly soaked with water, yet preserving its original shape, though ready to dissolve? Would it not be judicious to get away with what we have? Like, you know what? Like, let's get out now, because the fighting here it's been really crazy. Like, there's one point where like Claiborne has like he's followed those orders from Bragg, and his men, they just get absolutely annihilated. And there's one part where he's occupying the reverse slope of a hill, and he is kind of acting as a rear guard at this point, and the federal units advance across his front, and he keeps counterattacking, and he temporarily does halt them, but finally like exhaustion sets in, and he's got to fall back too. And he like we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but he is pissed at
well,
Bragg. Like,
he right. And so by 3 o'clock late mid afternoon or so, they realize they're done. So the Rebs are going to set up a defensive line under Breckenridge, south of Shiloh Church. She's going to basically have about 5,000 guys and 12 guns. And their job is to do the old 16th Maine thing, just buy us time,
yeah,
right? They're the sacrificial lambs. So they hold up the Rebs, the Union guys for 2 hours, which is really impressive. They do, and it does allow the Rebs to retreat. So if by 5 o'clock or so, the Battle of Shiloh is officially over.
yeah.
Um, Grant and Buell are going to capture all the land they lost the previous day. They're going to get it all, and it's going to be a huge turning point for this battle at that point going forward. And it's really going to be, it must have been a tough situation for Beauregard though, because he had, victory snatched from him and he thought he had it. And I go back to what we said before. It was what would have happened if they didn't have that rain, okay,
Totally.
on April 3rd and 4th and 5th. And they didn't have to wait till April 6th to start this. If they could have pushed and they could have done their plan, Buell wouldn't have arrived until the night of the 6th, no matter what, right? He was on the
Exactly.
slow train. He wasn't going to get there. Lou Walls was chasing cavalry. He was, chasing butterflies in the field somewhere for forever. And they finally, I mean, to their defense, they made it at the perfect time.
They did.
But you want to believe in divine intervention for the
Yeah.
Federals. This is the battle for you, Mary,
Yeah,
because
or
this
just
is
luck, like just luck that this happened. There so one of the last divisions to come in though, and kind of as just before the rebels like really retreat around 3:30 or so, is Thomas J. Wood, and this is where Garfield is. And it's actually he's leading a brigade, the 20th Brigade, and he's going to try and go after the Confederates. But the funny thing about this is Garfield is his commander's Thomas J. Wood, and that's the guy that gets the unfortunate command from Garfield at
Yep.
Chickamauga.
Yeah, it's funny how it is.
But
Garfield,
it was just an interesting part of this
but
battle.
but Garfield, I mean, you don't hear a lot about Garfield in the Civil War. You really
No.
don't. I mean, but he had a good quote that actually the Garfield Society actually tweeted today, as a matter of fact, because on
Mm.
my notes. But he says, the horrible sights I have witnessed, I can never describe. No blaze of glory that flashes around the magnificent triumphs of war can ever atone for the horrors of the scene of carnage. And that was Garfield talking about Shiloh. And you see a lot of these stories, a lot of these quotes. So, night is going to fall on the 7th of April, and the Union soldiers are settling in for camp for the night. And they start to see some weird stuff in the
Yeah.
field, right? So they look at the field, they see soldiers in the field, and they see the injured and dying in the field, and they're glowing. Okay. And it would become to known as the angel's glow. And word spreads throughout the camps of this glowing. And they were very religious people at the time, but the soldiers believe that it's actually God heard the pleas of these dying and injured soldiers to come and save them.
Hmm.
I mean, what else are you going to think, right? So, and so this glow, though, it's funny. It was a long time mystery, and all kinds of theories of what this glow thing was, and no one really know. And fast forward to 2001.
Yep.
Okay, there's a kid whose mother is a microbiologist. My old job. No. Okay, and there's a bacteria in the soil, and I'm going to butcher this one, Mary. It's called Photocrotus luminitis. If you say that 3 times, Hagrid shows up, by the way, just out of curiosity, okay?
I am not. I was
I'm not even going to
It's
try.
funny. I was actually reading the article before we recorded this, and I meant to tell you, can you please pronounce this shit because I'm gonna butcher the fuck out of it like I do everything else.
Photocrobatus luminitis. One more
It's
time, and Beetlejuice comes. I'm going to leave
it's
that alone.
it's a
But
parasite, right?
it
It's
is,
something about like
and
it vomits in
well,
the
it,
room.
it, it gives off a glow, but it's funny because it's weird because it's basically it. They think that it probably existed because the dampy ground and the rain and the mud that all fell, because it can't survive in a human body. It's too warm. So they
Yeah.
think as the bodies were dead and they were cooling, this bacteria was
Yep.
illuminating.
Because
So
some of the soldiers got hypothermia, but the interesting thing about it is that when they did take these soldiers that, obviously were still alive, the ones that had been glowing actually had a higher survival rate than the ones that hadn't been glowing because apparently this type of bacteria, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, whatever it is, it killed off the bacteria that would have caused the infections.
right. So you know what? Who's to say? Maybe it was the angels, right? Who knows? Maybe it was. You never know. But it did. But it did save quite a bit of lives.
Yeah.
Um, in that night. And that must have been something because we talked before about, the Northern Lights they saw at
Mhm.
Fredericksburg. And now you're seeing this. Well, you saw this first was the timing, but this type of thing must have been mind numbing for these people to see. I mean, think about you're a soldier and you see the most carnage, this horrible, horrible stuff. And now you see these bodies glowing. I mean, what the freaking hell?
Yeah.
You know, but the sun does come up the next day. Believe it or not, it does. On April 8th, and Sherman, his fifth division is going to go south, and they're going to run into a skirmish line with Nathan Bedford
Yeah.
Forrest.
And again, they're
And
just doing a recon. They
they,
don't,
they just
this is
yeah, they just
like
want to
Sherman's
see
getting surprised again.
they just want to see if the Rebs are really retreating or they're
Yeah.
setting up a defensive line. So they sent old Blingy down there to go check them out. They ended up at a place called Falling Timbers. It's about 6 miles south of Pittsburgh Landing. And like I said, they're trying to see what the scoop is. And Sherman runs into them, and he's going to get beaten up by Forrest. And we talk a lot about Forrest and Sherman. We'll talk more about that in
Yep.
details in a second. But Forrest is protecting the rear of the army as they're retreated, and he's going to get the best of Sherman with this one. Forrest is does that great story where he's going to get stuck behind the Union lines, and they're going to catch Forrest, but he grabs that soldier, throws him on the horse, and he rides away. And they're shooting at him, and he throws the soldier off. And according to Shelby Foote, it was the last shot at the Battle of Shiloh. But it's a great story because he escapes. But
Yep.
isn't it funny though how as you look forward, we talk like Meridian
Yep.
with Suey Smith, right?
Yep.
How these guys set up these rivalries, right?
Oh, big
And
time.
there's a couple rivalries. I know there's one you want to talk about
Hmm.
that comes with Sherman out of this battle. And there's no way to document what they really thought of these people, but you can sort of see based on previous experiences how they probably set up.
Absolutely. The one with Forrest, definitely. And as you said, like, absolutely, with the Meridian campaign, you can see that. And Sherman has that quote too, saying, like, I don't care if it bankrupts the treasury and how many fucking guys die. Like, we need to get Nathan Bedford Forrest. But the other rivalry that begins here that doesn't get talked about a lot, and again, this is just my opinion. I'm reading between the lines, like what we do on this podcast. It's just an opinion from what I see. This is where the rivalry between Clayburn and Sherman begins. And I don't think it was necessarily Clayburn thought of it that way. I think it was Clayburn was in Sherman's head as much as Forrest was in Sherman's head. And you think about it, like I was joking around today on Twitter a few times as well as on Facebook saying, this is where Sherman gets Clayburned, you know? Um, Clayburn is the one to attack him the morning of April the 6th. And then you look throughout the rest of their history, Missionary Ridge, Kennesaw
Yeah.
Mountain. Kennesaw Mountain was one of Sherman's rare frontal attacks. And he is attacking right where Clayburn is. And I think by that point, he was like, fuck it, I'm going to get this guy because he's, beat me down so much. And if you look at how some of these guys, how they fight, you can see the personal in it. Like we saw it with Five Forks as well, between Sheridan and Warren. Like there is an element of Mean Girls in these battles between these guys. And I do believe that as much as this is where Forrest and Sherman started their rivalry, this is also where the rivalry that doesn't get talked about much, but Clayburn and Sherman. I think Clayburn was in his head so much.
Well, I think what this battle did, it wasn't just personal at that level. It
Yeah.
told the nation, right, both sides of this, that this was going to be a thing. This was not a quick little thing. We talked before, last week with this, how most people thought this thing was going to be over quick. Grant's talking about one more big battle, spike the ball, put these guys away. This is going to be done.
Yeah.
But in the North, the Northern papers were mortified at the casualty numbers. Now, these casualty numbers, I know you like to read them, but 13,047 Union, 10,679 casualties for the Confederates. That's 23,746. And it's very famous because it is more than all American wars at that point combined. And it did not play well in the North. It didn't. So Grant, who was the hero of Henry and Donaldson just 2 months before, is suddenly getting shit on by everybody in the North. They want him gone. And you know who's happy hearing that? Halleck's happy hearing that,
so
right?
He's behind that bush, just kind of rubbing his hands together.
He's like, oh yeah.
And it's funny, like there's a newspaper article that comes out, a few days after the battle that is saying like how great Grant was there. But then there's another one that comes out and it's absolutely just like scathing towards Grant and basically saying he was caught off guard and everything else. And that's where the rumors start to fly. But the other thing too is a lot of the soldiers that fought here, they were already blaming Grant before the positive newspaper article came out. But then of course they're going to be even more so after this really negative one comes out. And it was Whitelaw Reid. I think he was wrote for the Cincinnati Gazette. He was the one that wrote it. And Lieutenant Governor of Ohio, Benjamin Stanton, said that Grant should be court-martialed or shot. And so this starts putting a lot of pressure on Abraham Lincoln to get rid of Grant. And all he says is, I can't spare this man. He fights.
He had his head up his hurl butt on April 5th, because he didn't think this thing was going to start. But I think what really freaked the people out is the Northern people were like, yeah, we want to win this, but we don't want cash. We don't want blood casualties. This is not what we want. We just want them to stop. So I think they realized this was more in the South. This thing is a complete disaster. Beauregard is going to retreat to Corinth. He's going to get beaten again by Grant, Buell, and John Pope's going to show up and beat him too. And the big thing though is Albert Sidney Johnson's death, right? So that's the huge loss out of this for the South. He what that did is it denied the Confederacy a competent commander in the West to fight the Union. It was, Davis said he was the South's greatest general, so you're hearing he dies, you lose all this ground, you get beaten up to a pulp. So you can see how that is going to play. But, I think everybody was surprised at the carnage of Shiloh. And it was the worst of humanity. Hand-to-hand fighting. death, artillery, it was just brutal. Ulysses Grant, and he was even surprised. He
Yeah.
has that quote. He says, "I saw an open field in our possession on the second day, um, over which the Confederates had repeated charge during the day before. I assume at the Hornets' Nest, so covered with dead that it would be possible to walk across the clearing in any direction, stepping on dead bodies without a foot even touching the ground." So even they were surprised. I mean, I think all of them were. I'm sure they were very very happy to win, but at the same time, what that did is even though this was a little bit into the war. I mean, it's been a year since Sumter, right?
Yeah.
I think what this did is it shook the country to a point that this is something that's going to be really fucking bad, right?
Yeah.
And I mentioned before, I think on social media, that quote that I always think about with that was that one soldier says, "I was never worse scared than I was at Shiloh," and that's one that I think a lot of these guys said. And the sad part is this was a tip of the iceberg compared to what was coming. But I
Exactly.
think this was a harbinger of what was to come. And I think both sides knew that whoever was going to win this war was going to be a war of attrition. It was going to cost a lot of bodies. And this was the first, Shiloh was the first type of hint that this is what it was going to have to be. And I
Yeah.
think and that's why it's so famous today. I think it's just
Mhm.
when you just it's one of those words like we said before, Shiloh, Antietam, Gettysburg. You just say Shiloh and it reminds you of death and carnage and
Exactly.
misery.
Yeah, and
And
that's
that's why it's
why,
important.
and I've mentioned on our Facebook Live and a few times just talking with you, this was the battle where, like, at their reunions after the war, the men would be talking and laughing and joking around about, oh, where were you? Where were you? Well, I was at this battle. But then one of them would speak up and say, I was at Shiloh. And like the room would just go silent because, that was where it began. So you have Shiloh where it's kind of the oh shit moment. It's awakening America to how bad this is going to be. But then in September, you have Antietam, and Antietam is absolute carnage as well. But the thing that adds to that is the fact that there are photographs of the bodies at Antietam, and that just is another, like, the
Mhm.
bringing the reality home. Now you can just imagine, what if there had been a photographer at Shiloh to capture if we could see the words of these soldiers, like what it looked like how much harder would it have been for the American people at that time to see the carnage, because I don't think there's any photographs of the aftermath of Shiloh. Like, the aftermath is described, it looked like a tornado had went through, because
Mhm.
the trees were all like totally decimated from just the artillery. Like, there was men that were killed by falling tree limbs in this battle. Um, it's absolutely horrible. There's one story I did want to mention, and that's that of W.H.L. Wallace, who was left for dead by some artillery by his men because he'd been shot through the eye, I think it was. And he's severely wounded. Well, they find him, I think, on the 7th or the 8th, and they take him to Cherry House, which is Grant's headquarters. And his wife finds out he's there. His wife actually was at this battle helping care for the wounded.
Mhm.
Um, so she finds out he's there and he's unconscious, and she goes in and she holds his hand and he wakes up. And for a few days after, W.H.L. Wallace rallies back, but then he takes a turn for the worse. And just before he dies, he says to his wife, I shall see you in heaven. And he passes away. And he's one of the ones that, like, he made that stand with his men at the Hornet's Nest, to buy time. Him and Prentice bought time for Grant. Like, if they had not made that, it was basically distracting. Bragg was the one doing the attacks there in the Confederate side. It was basically distracting them so Grant could form his men into a line.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the first experience that this was going to be a real total war.
Yeah.
This was going to be it. And it's probably where, Sherman got the idea later on of what it was going to take to win this. That this
Yeah.
wasn't going to be a situation like that guy Bull Run said, you can sop up all the blood with a handkerchief for this. This is how it's going to be. It was something that was going to be real. And that's why it's important that as these battles go on, you study the psychology of these and how it was going to go. And it's why McClellan was doing so much to support and train his guys in the East
Mm-hmm.
to try to minimize the death. because I think they realized after Shiloh everything changed. I think the whole mentality of this war changed at Shiloh.
Yeah, it did. It was just, I think, and it changed on both sides too. You know, like you have somebody like Claiborne who, in his report, he full on blames Braxton Bragg. And I think Bragg was probably in his head for the rest of the war with shit, this guy fucked me up once, like, you know, with this order. And like Claiborne was not one to ever question. He questioned. He was like, you want me to do what? Where? Okay. Claiborne does it though, like, because he never just, the one thing about Claiborne, he never disobeyed orders. Um, but he, you know, he gets his, the men are absolutely annihilated. Like he starts off with 2,700 and then he's only got 800 the morning of the 7th. And then by the end of the day, he's left with like, I think it's just over 80 troops or something like that. You know, like it's absolutely just horrific. But the one thing that he does after this is he goes back and he tries to think, well, what could we have done? Because his troops are getting pounded by that artillery. What could we have done? So this is where the sharpshooters come in, and Claiborne actually has sharpshooters um, in his brigade after this battle because he recognizes that if they had sharpshooters in their skirmish line as they advance, they could take out the artillerists. So he chooses 5 best men from, I think, each regiment. I hope I'm getting that right. Um, to form this kind of special brigade that would be just sharpshooters. And not only is this, you know, done for, you know, he's thinking this could help against artillery and all that when we're advancing, but the one thing that it did do is it boosted morale because the men would have competitions to see who was the best shot.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how I found that aspect really interesting. And he went around and he talked to each of like his subordinates about, what do you think about this? Like, could this work? And that's where he came up with the idea for these sharpshooters.
Yeah. We saw the North too with Hiram Berdan, who would come
Yep.
later on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big part of it. But I think at the end of the day, what Shiloh's going to do is going to, like I said, it's going to prove this war is going to go on. It's going to show the military might of the North. It's going to prove that the South needs to win this war by just killing the will. And seeing the newspaper headlines about wanting to get rid of Grant and shock the carnage was probably something that was music to their ears because it was something in that direction. But again, a lot of stuff for all the success the Union was having, the Rebs were having in the East, the West was a mess. It really, really was. It's funny how you have an exact opposite. It's like
Yeah,
180 on
and
both sides.
it's not really looked at just like today. Like the West is, I mean, I think it's starting to be looked at even more, but it's not something like, you know, you hear, I think people get into the Eastern theater before they get into the Western theater. But then when you look at the Western theater, you're seeing like, wow, this was like, it was, you know, such carnage. And again, it's geography's playing a role, right? Like news isn't reaching it as fast. It's further away, so it's further removed from the seat of the government in the north. You know, just different things like that are playing into it. But I really think like this is where, you know, like the war is starting to be decided in the Western theater, I think, at this point.
Well, I think it was. I think for all the press that the war gets in the East with McClellan and
Mm-hmm.
eventually Meade and those guys, the West is where this thing was won or lost. It really, really was. Capturing the Tennessee and then ultimately the Mississippi River and then going through Vicksburg and then taking Atlanta. That was the war. That was it. All the stuff in the East is window dressing. I love my Gettysburg. Don't get me wrong,
Oh, I do too.
but
And I mean,
you
Antietam's
know,
important too for the emancipation. That's kind of like the turning point in the war. Like East and West, like all battles matter, as we say. But in the West, you have these victories that I think are a little bit more of the strategic to really break the Confederacy, because this is where the kind of the infrastructure is. Like this is where like there's lots of trains here. This is where they're getting supplies. They lose the
mhm,
Mississippi River eventually. You know, it's all this East and Western theater are all factoring into this puzzle that is the Civil War, and you have to have all those pieces for it to make sense.
mhm. No
Because
question. No question.
we've seen in our discussion about like the March to the Sea how that starts affecting Lee in the East, because slowly, very slowly, he's unable to get supplies, you know,
Mhm.
because the railroads are being ripped up.
Yep, and that's going to be it too. I mean, you're going to have taken down those important railroads we talked about.
Yep.
And it's why Sherman's going to focus on those railroads in the North Carolina campaign, because the experiences he had in the West. So
Yeah.
he knew the way to stop the South was to deny them their ability to deliver weaponry and food, and that's ultimately what's going to doom Lee and Johnston and all of them. Is not so much beating them down, killing every soldier; it's denying them their resources, which is exactly what they did. And I think which the lesson from Shiloh is, it just showed them that total war was going to be necessary. This wasn't going to be, and we did our best. The Rebs, let's walk away. They knew they were in for the long haul.
Exactly.
So I think it's a good discussion. I think Shiloh's fun to talk about. It's a very appropriate, being today as we record this, the first day of the Battle of Shiloh's anniversary, 159 years later, right?
159.
Okay.
I did the math this morning.
Wow, geez.
Counted on my fingers.
You kept your shoes on, which is impressive. Never tough,
I did.
But anyway, so we'll leave it there. We'll talk more about some of these campaigns coming up next time. So what's next?
So next week we are talking part 2 of secession. So we're going to be talking about Fort Sumter, and then the week after that we are going to be talking about the catch or the when Jeff Davis is running away and his capture. We're going to be talking about.
You mean his escape?
Yes, escape. I'm sorry. Fuck. Jesus.
We're going to talk about the catch.
The catch.
Jeffrey Mayer, we talking about? Yeah, right field, Yankees, Orioles, 1997. Are we talking about? Okay. Anyway, so we'll talk about that. So we got the live coming up on Saturday, and we're going to start thinking long term about our next book club, which is coming up in March. We'll talk about that. Round tables around the corner. A couple of weeks, we'll talk about that. But I think we'll drop it here, and we'll head off to some big things coming up down the road. All of our episodes are listed on the website. You can go on to Cape Cod. Wow, I did that for the first time forever. Wow.
Oh my God, you haven't done that in a long time.
Because I got the shirt on today.
We'll just edit that one out.
CivilWarBreakfast.com. You can see Mary put all the episodes in for the next 87 years in there. So if you want to see, we're going to be talking about 2048. We'll talk about that. Today we're talking about Vicksburg.
We talked about that last week.
Shut up. But we'll talk. We got a lot of stuff, a lot of fun stuff coming down the road. So hopefully we'll join our live again on Saturday. Hope we have a good time. Hopefully we have about 1 million people on the live. And
hold on to your butts.
Hold on to your butts. We'll talk. We'll talk about that. So
I want someone to say that in a Creole accent, like Beauregard would have.
Oh my gosh, it's just so stupid things we do. But I think we did justice we did Shiloh very good justice these last 2 weeks. I think we did. I think it's I don't want to say it's a fun story to talk about, but it's an important story to talk about. And I think it's one that everybody should study because it makes a lot more sense. Just because it didn't happen east of the Mississippi doesn't mean it didn't happen. And I think, but this is one I think people study. This is one that a lot of people, it's on that national mindset of Shiloh.
Yeah, it's not like, if you say Shiloh, a lot of people know what that is, but not if you say Chickamauga or Chattanooga, there's not as much known about those battles. But I think, when it comes to like the effect of morale, Shiloh is up there with Antietam for what it did. Antietam had the photographs, but then Antietam's also got the emancipation with it. But then Shiloh is just like the absolute carnage.
It was.
And a lot of it is the soldiers writing home, talking about what they've seen as well. It just, they went through a lot there. The Union soldiers didn't eat for like a week after the battle.
Yeah.
Because the supplies couldn't get through.
It was. So anyway, so we will drop it here. We'll have a good time. So Mary, again, pleasure, all yours. And we will look forward to talking to you soon. So everybody, thanks for listening. We appreciate the support as always. And we look forward to seeing you on the live on Saturday. So signing off from Pittsburgh Landing, Tennessee. Not really, but we can pretend. We look forward to talking to you on the other side.
Yeah. See you guys later. And thanks for all your support.
Peace the hell out.
See y'all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.